God's story, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So part of God's story is about three guys and a raging fire, and it goes like this. God's special family, the Israelites, were sent to live in a place called Babylon. It wasn't their real home, and they were ruled by a king who didn't follow God. His name was King Nebuchadnezzar, and he decided to choose the smartest, strongest, most handsome Jewish men to leave their home and come work for him in his palace. Three of the guys he chose were named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Actually, they had different names before that, but the king forced them to change their names. They went through a 3-year training program where they learned the official language and fancy laws of the kingdom. Can you imagine if you had to move to a strange new place and be forced to change your name? That would be pretty hard. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego kept following God no matter what. They just had to figure out how to obey God and serve the king. One day, King Nebuchadnezzar decided to build a giant gold statue of himself. It was 90 feet tall. That's like 3 school buses stacked on top of each other. And every time the people heard trumpets, they had to stop what they were doing, bow down, and worship the statue. Anybody who didn't worship it would be thrown into a fiery furnace. Back then, that was like a room full of fire. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego knew that their God was the only real God, and they should never worship anyone but him. So when everyone else was bowing to the statue, they didn't. The king was furious when he heard about this, but he decided to give them a second chance. He had Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego brought before him so they could change their minds. But instead, they told the king, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will deliver us from your hand. But even if he doesn't, we will not serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was so mad, he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual and commanded his men to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the blazing fire. So they did. The furnace was so hot that even some of the king's own men were killed just by getting too close to the fire. Well, pretty soon, the king looked into the furnace and noticed there weren't just 3 men in the furnace. There was someone else in there with them. And they were all walking around. We don't know who that 4th person was. Some people think it was Jesus. Some people think it was an angel. Whoever it was, God was protecting them from the fire. And when the king ordered them to walk out of the furnace, they weren't burned at all. They didn't even smell like smoke. The king was amazed. He said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." The king had never seen a God who would rescue his people like that. After this, the king actually encouraged people to worship God. He even told the people in Babylon they could never say anything against God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego trusted in God and were willing to give up their lives rather than worship anyone except God. Whenever they had to choose between obeying God or something else, they chose God every time. No matter what they went through, God was always with them. And that's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So in case you missed it, here's the quick version. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego followed God. They worked for the king. They refused to worship the king. The king sent them to a furnace. God rescued them. The king was amazed. They followed God no matter what. And that's a part of God's story.